Hello and welcome to Untwisted Threads. Today is the third video in our series all about colorwork this season, so if you like Fair Isle and colorwork knitting, make sure you're subscribed to our channel so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming videos. If you've missed the first two videos in the series, where I explain more about what colorwork knitting is, with a few different pattern styles, and my recommendations for what not to do when knitting colorwork, they're linked in the description if you'd like to watch those ones too. I think that choosing the right yarn for colorwork can honestly make or break a project. I think it's so important that I wanted to make an entire video all about how to choose the best yarn for your colorwork projects. At the end, I'll share a little list of some yarns that we have reviewed already on the channel that I think would work great for colorwork. Let's get started. So I have a couple of recommendations for what I think you should look for when choosing your yarn for your colorwork projects. Something you can block. My first recommendation is to look for a yarn that you can block. If you saw our How Not to Knit Colorwork video or have knitted colorwork before, you may know that colorwork has a tendency to pucker. One way to smooth out the sections of colorwork in your project is to steam or wet block them. If you decide you want to choose a yarn that does not have an animal fiber content, your stitches and puckered fabric may not even out. So to give your project the best possible chance to look even and be able to block, I recommend choosing a yarn that will block. So to start, what are the types of yarns that don't block well? Well, my recommendation for you not to choose are plant fibers like cotton and also acrylic. So why not cotton or plant fibers? I personally think that plant fibers have too much structure, so if you make any mistake, this yarn will show it. The yarn and stitches keep their structure, meaning that even when blocking, your work will show very little, if any change at all. So if you live in a warmer climate, maybe try a cotton and wool blend yarn, so hopefully your stitches will block out a little bit more. Cotton yarns in particular are also typically a little heavier than other yarns, so that could be a negative factor too. They also have a shine to the yarn that I don't particularly like for my colorwork projects. And now for acrylic yarns. I really wish there was a video like this when I was learning how to knit because acrylic yarn frustrates me so much. Take it from my horrible mistake of trying to knit not one, but two colorwork sweaters with acrylic yarn. Don't put yourself through that trouble. From a distance, yeah, it may not look that bad. Okay, yes, you're probably still going to see all of that puckering. It makes me so ashamed now to see that sweater, but I was only a beginner, and we live, we learn, and we can move on. Or we can reknit the same sweater again in a different yarn. Yes, you can practice with acrylic yarns, but for one, the synthetic fibers in acrylic yarns don't wet block well, if at all, and two, acrylic yarn is heavy. So starting with number one, simply put, you can't wet block it because acrylic yarn is constructed from plastic fibers that just cannot be shaped with water. You can't block it into shape and expect it to stay that way because this type of yarn just doesn't work like that. Yes, steam blocking is an option as long as your yarn doesn't get too hot, and that will melt the yarn. And for number two, acrylic yarn is heavy. Since it doesn't keep its shape like wool does, I made a sweater as a beginner, and after being worn for not even an hour, the neckline was huge, my sleeves went down to my knees, and the body was the length of a dress. Okay, maybe it wasn't that extreme, but I think you get the picture. So no, I do not think acrylic is a great option at all for colorwork. I'm not going to lie, it's gonna draw you in, and with its beautiful color selection, it's going to be so tempting, but please let this be the little voice in the back of your head telling you that your sweater is going to be heavy and stretch out and not look even. So in summary, plant fibers like cotton and synthetic fibers like acrylic may not be your best option. So what do I recommend? Wool. Well, animal fibers really. I recommend these because of their ability to block and its lightweight. Again, you want your stitches to be able to block and even out, and with wool you are able to do that. Also, its weight. Wool is lightweight. Some more than others, of course, but even with the multiple strands of different colors being used in your design, it's not going to be super heavy and you won't feel like your sweater is a weighted blanket. Unless that is what you're going for, then by all means, choose acrylic or cotton. Strong yarn. One of the things I really try to look out for when knitting any project, but especially colorwork, is a higher twist or ply for strength. I think if you're going through the time and effort to pick out your yarn, colors, and knit a beautiful colorwork project, that it's important to make sure that your yarn will hold up and last. I think the easiest way to do this is to look for a 4-ply yarn or more. Yarn labels will often say what ply the yarn you're looking at has, but an easy way to check is to simply unwind the end of a yarn to see how many individual fibers are twisted together. Another bonus is if the yarn you choose has a little bit of nylon in it. Nylon is a great fiber added to yarns for additional strength. Yarn recommendations. So keeping all of that in mind, yarn that can block, is lightweight, hardy, and strong, I wanted to give a few recommendations of yarn that we have reviewed so far, both in superwash merino, non-superwash merino, and more rustic wools that have a larger variety of colorway options. Now keep in mind that different fiber types will have a different looking end result. A superwash merino that is more round and bouncy will have more of a crisp look. Therefore, if your tension is uneven, this yarn will be a little bit less forgiving and may be more difficult to block out. On the other hand, with more woolly or rustic yarns, its longer or fuzzy fibers fill in all of the extra gaps and are overall a little bit more forgiving when it comes to tension. Now, I would say the in-between point for both of these types of yarns would be a non-superwash merino. They're still a fairly round yarn, but they don't have that super long fiber that a Peruvian Highland wool does. But there are still enough fibers to fill in the gaps a little bit between the stitches, more than a superwash merino does. So starting with the fingering weight yarns, this is Sandnes Garn Sisu. This 50-gram skein is an 80% wool, 20% nylon yarn, and comes in 34 colors. Next is Signature's 4-ply from West Yorkshire Spinners. This 100-gram skein is a 75% wool, 25% nylon yarn, and has 29 colorway options. Next is a few merino fingering weight yarns, starting with Scheepjes Metropolis. This 50-gram skein is 75% merino wool, 25% nylon that comes in 80 colors. Last for the fingering weight yarns is Cascade Heritage Sock. This 100-gram skein is a 75% superwash merino wool, 25% nylon yarn, and comes in 108 colors. Next, for the sport weight yarns, this is Hobbii Friends Extra Fine Merino. This 50-gram skein is a 100% superwash merino yarn and comes in 50 colors. For DK weight yarns, first we have Drops Daisy. This 50-gram skein is a 100% merino yarn and comes in 26 colors. Next is another 100% merino yarn and is called King Cole Luxury Merino and comes in 42 colors. Lastly, for a worsted weight option, and a yarn that I think would be a top pick for you to choose, is of course Cascade 220. This 100% Peruvian Highland wool yarn comes in, oh yes, you're reading that correctly, 170 colors. Now you can hold any of these yarns double or mix and match them, but I recommend keeping the fiber type, gauge, and twist or ply of the yarn consistent throughout your project. Have you used any of these yarns for colorwork before? What do you recommend when choosing yarn for colorwork? I would love to hear your suggestions and comments below. If you enjoyed today's colorwork video, please give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time.